Charlie Swift is really really the moral and ethical center of this lawsuit. Charlie was appointed really for the purpose of negotiating a plea agreement with Mr. Hamdan. Because of, again, this sort of superficially attractive fact of connection to bin Laden, Hamdan was at the front of the line in terms of people that the U.S. government wanted to sort of put out there as an example of how this commission process could work, but not through an actual trial, simply through a plea agreement. And Charlie was having none of it. He wanted charges, he demanded charges, and in I think late December of '03 or January, he demanded charges, and he demanded them under the auspices of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which are the federal statutes that essentially are the criminal code for the U.S. military. The government responded by saying that no, in fact, the UCMJ does not apply to your client. He has no right to a speedy trial or to receive charges until we're good and ready to tender them. And Charlie was displeased with that answer. And what he decided to do was bring an action in federal court, naming as defendants President Bush, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, General Hemingway, several other very, very high-ranking members of the U.S. government as defendants, contending that this entire system that they had constructed in order to try Mr. Hamdan was unlawful, and that they needed to justify it. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Joe, who will talk a little bit about.
Next slide.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just underline the point that Charles has made in connection with the heroism of Lieutenant Commander Swift. I mean, this is not a career-enhancing move for a career military officer of the United States Navy to sue the Secretary of Defense and the President of the United States, to step outside of the carefully constructed ad hoc tribunal that has been set up to speedily convict, the worst of the worst, people that have been prejudged as, not deserving of the full due process that any U.S. citizen would be afforded. When the case came in through David and his contact with Professor Katyal, I mean, we took a look at that military order, the military order of November 13th, 2001, and I think we at Perkins Coie recognized right away that, wait just 1 minute here, the President of the United States, as far as we're aware, doesn't really have the authority to set up judge, jury, prosecutor under our scheme of divided tripart government with executive, legislative, and judicial branch. And the fact that under that military order, the military commission process was only going to be for non-citizens, and was a huge red flag. Non-citizens go through this second-tier, sort of second-class adjudicatory system. U.S. citizens, of course, would be afforded, the constitutional rights of fair trial by jury, and so forth and so on. So we of course, as Charles said, we don't the law of war isn't something. I mean, we're IP litigators, Charles and I, and David likewise on other areas of commercial contract disputes and business torts. Okay, so we don't exactly know all the ins and outs of this, but we wanted to look very, very carefully at that. And it was inspirational to work with Lieutenant Commander Swift, who was a model of moral courage in stepping out. I mean, he represents, and Judge Lasnik said this from the bench at the very first hearing at a status conference in Seattle where this thing was filed. He represents everything that is finest, not just about the U.S. military, about the bar, and about the American system. I mean, there were actually some comments that sent chills down my spine as I sat there in the courtroom. The thing that makes this country great, he said, and this is a paraphrase, but it's a pretty close paraphrase. The thing that makes this country great is not that its power or its wealth. It's not that it's got the best army in the world. It's that it's got an independent judiciary which will do its best to guarantee to the most vulnerable members of society a fair hearing and due process of law in an impartial court. And that's what's going on in the Hamdan case, and he took time to commend Lieutenant Commander Swift and counsel for their willingness to play that role.